Imagine a book teeming with drama, miraculous deliverance, persecution, and divine intervention. A story so profound, it feels like one you should have always known. This is Third Maccabees, a text you may not have encountered, but one that powerfully demonstrates the resilience of faith and God's unmatched power to deliver his people. Unlike the first two Maccabees, which recount the Jewish rebellion against Greek oppression in Judea, Third Maccabees shifts focus to Egypt, where the Jewish community faces the wrath of King Ptolemy IV Philopator. This isn't a tale of swords and battles, but rather of faith under siege, God's miraculous intervention, and the unyielding courage of a community united by their trust in Him. Yet many have never heard this remarkable story. Why? The answer lies in the complex history of the biblical canon. While Third Maccabees is revered in the Ethiopian Orthodox Theological Bible and other Eastern traditions, it is absent from the Protestant canon, where it is classified as deuterocanonical. The book's gripping narrative recounts King Ptolemy's furious revenge after failing to defile the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. His decree of annihilation culminates in a terrifying plan, confining the Jewish community in a stadium and crushing them with war elephants. However, as his power peaks, God intervenes. The king's plans are thwarted, the Jews are miraculously saved, and even Ptolemy is compelled to recognize the might of Israel's God. This is more than a survival story. It's a testament to God's faithfulness, the strength of prayer, and the unwavering courage of those who refuse to abandon their faith, even in the face of death. For anyone curious about what's missing from the Western Bible or the sacred stories preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox Theological tradition, this video is a must-watch. Both inspiration and challenge, Third Maccabees invites us to reflect on how faith and divine power work together in the most extraordinary ways. From the miraculous and faith-filled story of Third Maccabees, a pressing question arises. Why has this book been excluded from so many Bibles? How could such a powerful narrative of God's deliverance and the resilience of his people be relegated to the margins of the Western biblical canon? To answer this, we must delve into the theological, historical, and cultural factors that led to its exclusion and reflect on what is lost when such stories are overlooked. One major reason for the exclusion of Third Maccabees lies in its theological themes. The book places significant emphasis on miraculous deliverance and divine intervention, portraying God's sovereignty and ability to rescue his people from dire circumstances. While these themes are celebrated in stories like Exodus or Daniel in the lion's den, Protestant reformers considered them less central to the biblical canon. Since Third Maccabees does not appear in the Hebrew Bible, and its themes of prayer, miracles, and deliverance did not directly contribute to the theological debates of the time, it was categorized as deuterocanonical and excluded from Protestant Bibles. Historical context also played a pivotal role. Unlike First and Second Maccabees, which focus on the Jewish revolt against Greek oppression in Judea, Third Maccabees shifts its focus to the Jewish diaspora in Egypt under the reign of King Ptolemy IV Philopator. This geographical and cultural departure may have contributed to its exclusion, as it does not directly address the political struggles of Judea or the Jerusalem temple. Instead, it tells the story of a community in exile, prompting questions about its relevance to the central biblical narrative of God's covenant with Israel. Yet this perspective overlooks the profound lessons of the book. Third Maccabees reminds us that God's power transcends time and place. Even in exile, God hears the prayers of his people and delivers them from impossible circumstances. The story of the Jewish community under Ptolemy highlights the unyielding nature of faith and the reality of divine intervention, even when the odds seem insurmountable. By excluding Third Maccabees, Western traditions not only lose a narrative of survival and resilience, but also miss an opportunity to reflect on universal values like courage, perseverance, and trust in God. Imagine being part of the Jewish community in Egypt during these events, facing annihilation under a ruthless king. Despite overwhelming despair, you would join your people in prayer, trusting that the God who delivered your ancestors would deliver you too. Today, the story of Third Maccabees still resonates as a reminder that God's power is not confined by geography or time. To exclude it is to miss a source of inspiration, a call to courage in the face of persecution, and a chance to meditate on the enduring strength of faith. Let this story challenge and encourage you to trust in the God who delivers, no matter the circumstances. From understanding why Third Maccabees was excluded from many biblical traditions, we now step into its historical backdrop, a period when the Jewish community in Egypt faced severe trials under the reign of Ptolemy IV Philopator. Known for his arrogance and cruelty, Ptolemy's actions led to both desecration and miraculous deliverance, leaving an indelible mark on history. Let's enter the world of Egypt's Jewish diaspora, a community striving to maintain their faith while enduring oppressive rule. Ptolemy IV, infamous for his indulgence and ruthlessness, ruled Egypt during a turbulent era from 221 to 204 BCE. His ambition knew no bounds, and his desire to dominate extended to the sacred symbols of the Jewish faith, particularly the Temple in Jerusalem. After his victory over Antiochus III at the Battle of Raphia, Ptolemy attempted to desecrate the Jewish temple by entering the Holy of Holies, the most sacred space reserved only for the high priest. However, as he approached, divine intervention struck him with terror and paralysis. Humiliated, Ptolemy left Jerusalem, but his grudge against the Jewish people grew. Returning to Egypt, Ptolemy unleashed a campaign of persecution against the Jewish community there. He issued decrees aimed at stripping them of their identity, including a barbaric order to brand Jews with hot iron marks, a physical and symbolic act of humiliation. Those who resisted faced execution. For the Jews, this decree was both a spiritual and physical affront, challenging their deepest religious convictions. Despite immense pressure, the Jewish community refused to surrender their faith. They gathered in secret, prayed for deliverance, and supported one another in their unwavering commitment to God. Their resistance became a testament to their resilience and faithfulness, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The setting of Third Maccabees paints a vivid picture of faith under fire, reflecting the universal struggle of believers throughout history. Surrounded by oppression, the Jewish diaspora in Egypt clung to the hope of God's deliverance, recalling the miracles of the Red Sea, Jericho, and the Exodus. Their prayers were not just pleas for help, but declarations of trust in a God who never abandons his people. Their story transcends history and speaks to modern challenges. In a world where cultural and societal pressures often clash with biblical values, we are reminded to remain steadfast, just as they did. Third Maccabees inspires us to trust in God's sovereignty, knowing he is greater than any opposition. This narrative challenges us to reflect. How do we respond when our faith is tested? Are we willing to stand firm, even at great personal cost? Let the story of Egypt's Jewish diaspora remind us of God's enduring presence. Just as he was with them, he is with us today, guiding us through every trial and sustaining us in every challenge. The struggle of the Jewish community in Egypt under the reign of Ptolemy IV Philopator stands as a poignant chapter of resilience and faith amidst oppression. This tale begins with arrogance and unchecked ambition, leading to a chain of events that threaten the very survival of the Jewish people. Ptolemy's sacrilegious actions were not merely a challenge to faith, but the spark for a campaign of brutal persecution and revenge. It all started after Ptolemy's victory over Antiochus III at the Battle of Raphia, when he sought to assert dominance by targeting the holiest symbol of Jewish worship, the Jerusalem Temple. His intentions were not driven by reverence, but by hubris. Ptolemy demanded entry into the Holy of Holies, a sacred space reserved exclusively for the high priest on the Day of Atonement. For the Jewish people, this act was not just offensive, but an outright affront to their God. Despite the pleas and warnings of Jewish priests and leaders, Ptolemy, driven by arrogance, pushed forward. Yet, as he approached the Holy of Holies, a divine intervention took place. Overwhelmed by terror, his body trembled uncontrollably, and he was struck by paralysis. According to tradition, God responded to this act of defiance not with words, but with overwhelming power, leaving the king humiliated and unable to proceed. Rather than repenting, Ptolemy allowed his humiliation to fester into fury. Back in Egypt, he launched a campaign of revenge against the Jewish community, whom he perceived as a threat to his authority. He decreed a census of all Jews, requiring them to be branded with hot iron, bearing the symbol of the Greek god Dionysus. This was not merely a physical mark, but a direct attack on their religious identity. For the Jews, such branding was a violation of their covenant with God, an act they could not accept. In the face of this cruelty, the Jewish community in Egypt stood firm. They gathered in secret to pray, drawing strength from the miracles of their ancestors, such as the parting of the Red Sea and God's protection during the Exodus. Their unwavering faith, even under the shadow of death, became a testament to the enduring power of belief. The crisis deepened as Ptolemy devised a harsh and symbolic plan, gathering the Jewish population of Egypt into a massive arena. This arena, once used for chariot races, was repurposed as a holding ground for thousands of individuals, men, women, and children alike. Ptolemy's intention was to display his authority and intimidate the Jewish community by unleashing war elephants into the crowd. This act was more than oppression. It was a calculated effort to erase their identity from Egypt. In the face of looming danger, Jewish families came together, praying fervently and placing their trust entirely in God. They reminded each other of past miracles, the parting of the Red Sea, the collapse of Jericho's walls, and the divine protection their ancestors had experienced. They held onto the hope that the same God who had halted Ptolemy in Jerusalem would once again act on their behalf. Their unwavering faith ultimately led to an extraordinary turn of events. This story is not just about the trials the Jewish community endured, but a profound testament to the power of faith in seemingly insurmountable situations. The Jews of Egypt faced immense pressure to compromise their beliefs and assimilate into the culture and political system that sought to erase their identity. Yet, they stood firm. Their faith, unity in prayer, and commitment to God's covenant carried them through. This narrative also reminds us that even in the darkest moments, God's presence is unwavering. No matter how oppressive the powers of the world may seem, prayer remains a source of strength and hope. Their steadfastness challenges us to trust in God's sovereignty and believe in His power to intervene, no matter the circumstances. As Ptolemy IV's fury against the Jewish people in Egypt escalated, the story reached its darkest point, a meticulously planned and ruthless campaign aimed at their complete eradication. This was not mere oppression. It was a calculated effort to erase an entire community. Yet, in the midst of what seemed like hopelessness, the unshakable faith of the Jewish people shone brighter than ever. a testament to the power of trusting in God. The decree was issued, and thousands of Jews, including families and children, were herded into a massive arena. Once a site of joyful chariot races, the arena now stood as a grim stage for terror. The cold stone walls echoed with the cries of those inside, yet the Jewish people held onto their faith. They found strength in their unity, refusing to give in to despair. Ptolemy ordered the preparation of war elephants to execute his harsh plan. These elephants, adorned with elaborate decorations and fueled by alcohol to heighten aggression, were set to be unleashed upon the crowd. To Ptolemy, this was more than punishment. It was a demonstration of his dominance, a statement that his empire could crush their faith. The scene was meticulously crafted, soldiers shouting commands, the rumble of restless elephants, and the display of power intended to instill fear. Amid this tense atmosphere, the Jewish people stood firm. Instead of succumbing to fear, they turned to prayer, forming a unified front of faith. Their prayers were not just cries for help, but declarations of trust in God. They recalled the miracles of the past, how the Red Sea parted, how Jericho's walls fell, and how Daniel was protected in the lion's den. These stories were not just memories, they were the foundation of their unyielding hope. This is more than a tale of adversity. It is a powerful reminder of the strength of faith in the face of overwhelming odds. Despite the oppressive forces around them, the Jewish people never wavered in their belief that God was with them, guiding them through their darkest hour. The day of reckoning arrived. Ptolemy IV, brimming with confidence, sat on his throne, anticipating a spectacle that he believed would solidify his dominance. The war elephants, armed with sharpened tusks and spurred into aggression with strong drink, were led to the gates of the arena. Inside, tension hung heavy in the air. Silent prayers echoed as fear filled the hearts of the crowd. When the gates began to open, all eyes fixed on the elephants. But then, something miraculous occurred. Instead of charging into the crowd as planned, the elephants suddenly turned back. They threw off their riders and rampaged through the ranks of Ptolemy's soldiers. In an instant, the carefully staged display of power became uncontrollable chaos. The elephants, once symbols of Ptolemy's might, turned into instruments of destruction within his own forces. Ptolemy, once the picture of arrogance, was struck with fear at the sight of the unfolding disorder. In a moment of desperation, he ordered the plan to cease immediately. The arena, moments earlier a scene of despair, was now filled with stunned silence. The Jewish community, who had faced what seemed like certain doom, became witnesses to a divine intervention that could not be denied. This event forced Ptolemy to acknowledge the power of the God of the Jews. Though his heart remained hardened in many ways, he could no longer dismiss what had occurred. The Jewish community, once marked for destruction, was delivered in a miraculous and undeniable way. Their unwavering prayers and steadfast faith had been answered not just with comfort, but with a bold and unmistakable act of divine power. This story is not only about miraculous deliverance, but also a profound testament to the power of faith and steadfastness in the face of insurmountable odds. The Jews in the arena did not surrender to fear. Their prayers were not acts of desperation, but bold declarations of trust that God would act on their behalf. The lesson of this narrative is clear. Even in the darkest moments, God's presence and power surpass all challenges. Faith is not about denying reality, but about trusting in God, the one who moves beyond circumstances to rescue and redeem his people. From the fervent prayers of the Jewish captives in the Hippodrome arena, we witness one of the most extraordinary moments in the story of Third Maccabees. Just when all hope seemed lost, God intervened, transforming a scene meant for destruction into a resounding testament of his unmatched power. What Ptolemy IV envisioned as a demonstration of his might became an undeniable reminder that no earthly ruler can rival the King of Kings. The fateful day arrived. Ptolemy IV, brimming with arrogance, sat on his throne, eagerly awaiting the end of an entire community. Around him, courtiers and soldiers stood silently, their eyes fixed on the hippodrome. Inside, thousands of Jews, families, children and elders, stood crowded together, their faces reflecting a mixture of fear and unshakable faith. Powerless to stop what was about to unfold, they turned to prayer, their collective voices rising like a single cry to the heavens. As the gates of the arena creaked open, the tension was palpable. The war elephants, adorned with elaborate decorations and driven to aggression with intoxicants, were led to the entrance. These towering beasts, symbols of overwhelming strength, were ready to unleash terror. To Ptolemy, they represented the ultimate display of his unchallengeable authority. But then, something miraculous occurred. When the elephants were released, they did not charge into the defenseless crowd as expected. Instead, they hesitated. These trained animals, conditioned to obey commands, suddenly became unresponsive. To the shock of their handlers, the elephants turned and charged in the opposite direction, straight into Ptolemy's own ranks. The very symbols of his power became the source of chaos, trampling his soldiers and disrupting their formations. Pandemonium erupted. The deafening roars of the elephants drowned out every other sound, reducing Ptolemy's meticulously orchestrated plan to shambles in mere moments. Even the most skeptical observers could not deny that this was no coincidence. It was the hand of God. The prayers of the Jewish people had been heard, and once again God acted decisively to save his people. This moment stands as a powerful testament that God's sovereignty surpasses all earthly powers. For the Jewish captives, it was not merely a miracle, but a profound reminder that their faith was never misplaced. And for Ptolemy, it was an unmistakable sign that no mortal king could ever overpower the supreme authority of God. The crowd of Jews inside the hippodrome, initially frozen in fear at the sound of war elephants, soon shifted from terror to awe. As chaos erupted outside the gates, they realized that God had intervened in a way no one could have foreseen. Their desperate prayers, which seemed futile moments before, now transformed into shouts of praise. Ptolemy IV, who moments earlier reveled in his supposed omnipotence, was now engulfed in confusion and dread. The king, who believed himself in control of all things, was forced to confront the reality that his power paled in comparison to God's might. In the midst of the turmoil, Ptolemy ordered an immediate halt to his plan. The elephants were withdrawn, the gates of the arena remained closed, and the Jews, who had braced themselves for the worst, were miraculously saved. They stood not just as survivors, but as witnesses to the supernatural power of God. What stands out is not only the miraculous rescue, but also the profound impact on Ptolemy himself. The king who sought to humiliate and destroy God's people was now compelled to acknowledge a power greater than his own. Though his heart remained hardened in many ways, he could not deny the divine intervention he had witnessed. This event was more than salvation. It was a testament to God's ultimate authority. This story offers three profound lessons. The power of prayer. Without weapons or allies, the Jewish community turned to prayer, and their prayers were answered. This serves as a powerful reminder that prayer is not merely an act of last resort, but a direct connection to God, who sees our struggles and intervenes in ways beyond our understanding. God's sovereignty over all, Ptolemy, one of the most powerful rulers of his time, saw his meticulously planned execution fall apart in minutes. This illustrates that no earthly power can stand against God's will. He is sovereign over all kingdoms and rulers. God's enduring protection. Just as he did during the Exodus, God did not abandon his people in Egypt under Ptolemy. His promises transcend time and space, offering protection and deliverance to those who trust in him. Imagine being one of the Jews in that arena, hearing the gates open and the elephants roar, believing the end was near. Then you witness the miraculous turn of events, a clear sign that God has heard your prayers. Fear gives way to awe, and you realize there is no circumstance beyond his power to change. Now imagine being Ptolemy, watching your plan unravel in an instant. The power and pride you clung to are shattered by a force far greater than anything you've ever known. This story isn't just a historical account. It's a reminder that God is still at work today, calling us to trust him, even when the odds seem impossible. From the chaos of Ptolemy, the fourth's failed execution plot, and the miraculous deliverance of the Jewish people, we arrive at the aftermath, a moment not only of survival, but also of restoration and renewal. What began as an attempt to annihilate the Jewish community ended in a profound display of God's faithfulness, leaving them not only alive, but stronger in their faith and identity. The Jewish community in Egypt, standing on the brink of destruction, witnessed God's power overturn their fate. The elephants, instead of becoming tools of devastation, turned against Ptolemy's own forces, shattering his plans. Ptolemy, once consumed by arrogance, was forced to acknowledge that his power was nothing compared to God's sovereignty. Yet God's deliverance didn't stop at saving lives. It turned their suffering into an opportunity for honor and renewal. In a dramatic reversal, Ptolemy issued decrees not only protecting the Jews, but also reaffirming their rights within Egyptian society. For the Jewish community, this was more than political restoration. It was deeply spiritual. Their faith, tested in the crucible of persecution, emerged stronger. They gathered to offer prayers and songs of thanksgiving, celebrating the God who had rescued them from the brink of annihilation. This moment was marked by the establishment of a new festival, the Festival of Deliverance, to commemorate God's miraculous intervention. Like Passover, this festival became a time to remember God's faithfulness and pass the story down to future generations. It was more than an occasion of gratitude. It was a declaration of faith. Families who had prayed together in fear now praised God together in joy, their voices rising in unity. The festival also became a symbol of resilience and unity. By gathering each year to celebrate, the community reaffirmed their shared history and identity. It was a reminder that no earthly power could erase their faith or sever their connection to God. The songs and prayers of the festival carried the message that God never abandons his people, no matter how far they may be from their homeland. This story challenges us to reflect. How do we respond when God intervenes in our lives? Do we move on, or do we choose to remember and honor him? The Jewish community chose to commemorate their deliverance, transforming God's actions into a legacy for future generations. It reminds us that God's past works are not just stories. They are the foundation for our present faith and hope. The themes of restoration and celebration in Third Maccabees resonate with us today. They remind us that God's deliverance is not only about survival, but about renewal. When God intervenes, he doesn't just bring us through trials. He restores us, strengthens us, and gives us a testimony to share. The Festival of Deliverance teaches us the importance of remembering what God has done, building our trust in him for the future. When we take time to honor God's faithfulness, we not only celebrate what He has done, but also declare our belief in His sovereignty. This story encourages us to share our testimonies, teaching future generations about His works, and trusting that the God who acted in the past is still with us today, guiding us through every challenge. From the joy and restoration of the Jewish community in Egypt, the story of Third Maccabees offers profound lessons on faith, courage, and the power of prayer. This is not merely an ancient narrative, but a timeless reminder of unwavering devotion to God in the face of adversity. For modern believers, Third Maccabees serves as both an inspiration and a call to live boldly in faith, even when confronted by challenges that seem insurmountable. One of the most striking themes of the story is the extraordinary resilience of the Jewish community in the face of existential threats. Ptolemy IV's decrees aimed not only to destroy their lives, but also to break their spirit and faith. Yet, even when forced into the hippodrome arena and facing what appeared to be inevitable destruction, they did not waver. Their courage wasn't born out of ignorance of the danger. They fully understood the stakes. Instead, their inner strength came from a profound faith in God as their protector, even when the path to deliverance was unclear. They prayed not for an easy escape, but for God's will to prevail, demonstrating a faith that transcended fear and uncertainty. The moment of divine intervention in the hippodrome is the most dramatic highlight of the story, underscoring the importance of prayer and reliance on God's sovereignty. Trapped with no visible way out, the Jewish people turned to God, their sole source of hope. Their prayers were not cries of despair, but declarations of trust. They believed in God's power and faithfulness, not because they knew how He would act, but because they were certain of His just and loving nature. This miraculous deliverance stands as a testament to the power of a community united in faith. More than that, it reminds us that prayer is not just a ritual, it is a powerful connection between humanity and the Creator, especially in times of greatest need. A profoundly meaningful aspect of the story in Third Maccabees is how the Jewish community in Egypt safeguarded their faith and identity amidst intense pressure to assimilate. The decrees of Ptolemy IV were not merely acts of persecution, they were deliberate attempts to erase the uniqueness of the Jewish people by forcing them to abandon their religious traditions. From compelling them to bear pagan symbols to demanding idol worship, Ptolemy sought to strip away their identity as God's covenant people. Yet, despite immense pressure, the Jews refused to surrender. They understood that faith was not just an aspect of their lives. It was the foundation of who they were, an integral part of their identity that could never be compromised. Their steadfastness was not rooted in stubbornness, but in a profound understanding of the significance of being chosen as God's people. They recognized that compromising their faith would not only erode their traditions, but also sever their sacred connection with the Almighty. Their willingness to endure severe consequences to uphold their beliefs demonstrated extraordinary courage and devotion to what they held sacred. The enduring lessons of Third Maccabees transcend its historical context, offering timeless wisdom for believers today. The story reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to remain faithful to God, even when the cost is high. The prayers in this narrative were not mere pleas for help. They were heartfelt acts of alignment with God's will, placing unwavering trust in His sovereignty. This story inspires us to stand firm in our faith, live boldly, and trust in God, the one who never abandons His people. Faith is not just something we practice, it is an integral part of who we are. The lessons of faith, courage, and identity in Third Maccabees offer a lens through which to view this story as an integral part of the larger biblical narrative. The account of the Jewish community in Egypt facing annihilation but experiencing miraculous deliverance resonates with themes woven throughout Scripture. It parallels God's acts of salvation in the Old Testament and anticipates the New Testament's call to endure persecution with steadfast faith and hope. Seen in this broader context, Third Maccabees is not just an isolated story, but a powerful testament to God's ongoing work throughout history. The deliverance in Third Maccabees bears striking similarities to the story of the Exodus. Just as their ancestors were oppressed under Pharaoh, the Jewish people in Egypt under Ptolemy IV faced the threat of destruction. In both cases, they were trapped, powerless before earthly rulers, and reliant on God's supernatural intervention for survival. In Exodus, God parted the Red Sea to lead his people to freedom. In Third Maccabees, he turned Ptolemy's war elephants against his own forces, thwarting his plans and saving the Jewish community. These stories highlight not only God's sovereignty over earthly powers, but also his unyielding faithfulness to his covenant people. The narrative also recalls the courage of Esther, who risked everything to save her people from Haman's genocidal plot. Like the Jews under Ptolemy, Esther's community in Persia faced the threat of extinction. In both instances, the survival of God's people depended on faith, prayer, and divine providence. The establishment of Purim to commemorate Esther's story mirrors the festival of deliverance created after the events of Third Maccabees, both serving as annual reminders of God's steadfastness and intervention. Another parallel can be seen in the story of Daniel. His refusal to bow to the king's decree and the miraculous protection he received in the lion's den reflect the steadfast faith of the Jews in Third Maccabees, who chose to remain loyal to their covenant with God despite the looming threat to their lives. Just as God shut the mouths of the lions to save Daniel, he intervened in the Hippodrome arena to protect his people from destruction. The story of Third Maccabees is more than history. It is a profound reminder for believers today. It calls us to remain steadfast in faith, even in the face of great trials, trusting that the God who delivered his people in the past is still at work in our lives today. The themes of persecution, deliverance, and faith in Third Maccabees extend beyond its historical setting, resonating deeply with the teachings of Jesus and the experiences of the early church. Jesus often reminded his followers of the cost of discipleship. He warned, "You will be hated by everyone because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved." Matthew 10:22. The faith of the Jewish community under Ptolemy IV, unwavering even in the face of death, reflects the perseverance Jesus called for, remaining steadfast in trust despite overwhelming challenges. The story in Third Maccabees also foreshadows the hope and ultimate salvation fulfilled in Jesus Christ in the New Testament. As Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 1:10, "He has delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us again." On him we have set our hope that he will continue to deliver us. The miraculous deliverance in the Hippodrome arena stands as a testament to God's saving power, not only in the past, but also in the present and future. Furthermore, the story highlights the profound importance of prayer. The prayers offered in the arena were not mere cries of desperation. They were powerful expressions of faith, much like Jesus' parable of the persistent widow, Luke 18:1-8. These prayers demonstrate that faith-filled petitions can move the heart of God, leading to miraculous outcomes beyond human comprehension. Most significantly, the deliverance in Third Maccabees reflects the ultimate redemption brought by Jesus. Just as God saved his people from Ptolemy's hand, Jesus came to save all humanity from sin and death. This story is not merely a historical account, but a vital piece of the greater tapestry of God's redemptive plan, a plan that transcends time and borders. When viewed within the broader context of the Bible, Third Maccabees reveals that God's work is never confined to one people or one era. The story of the Jewish community in Egypt emphasizes that God is always present, protecting his people no matter where they are. His intervention is not bound by geography or political systems. He acts on behalf of those who trust in him. This consistency strengthens our faith in God's unchanging nature and assures us that he is actively at work in our lives today. Finally, this story challenges us to see our own trials as part of God's greater plan. Just as he used the trials of the Jewish community in Egypt to display his power and strengthen their faith, he uses our struggles to shape us, draw us closer to him, and reveal his glory. Let Third Maccabees inspire you to trust in God's sovereignty, pray boldly, and remain steadfast in faith. Just as he delivered his people in Egypt, he is actively working in your story, calling you to trust him and find your place in his greater plan of redemption. From its miraculous deliverance to its profound lessons on faith, courage, and prayer, Third Maccabees stands as a powerful testament to God's sovereignty and faithfulness. This is more than just a survival story. It is a declaration of the resilience of a community that chose faith over fear, and of a God who intervened in their darkest hour. For modern believers, this book offers hope, encouragement, and a call to live boldly in faith, no matter the challenges. Third Maccabees matters because it reminds us that God's power knows no limits. When Ptolemy IV sought to annihilate the Jewish community in Egypt, God turned his plans into chaos. When the war elephants were poised to bring destruction, God redirected them to protect his people. This deliverance demonstrates that no force on earth, whether political, cultural, or personal, can stand against the will of God. Yet this story isn't just about God's intervention. It's also about the resilience of faith. The Jewish people, thrust into the hippodrome surrounded by fear, chose prayer over panic. In their darkest moments, they lifted their voices to heaven, trusting that the God of their ancestors would deliver them once more. Their example challenges us to trust God in our own trials, to stand firm in our identity as his people, and to pray with the confidence that he hears and responds. For those who feel overwhelmed by life's challenges, the message of Third Maccabees is clear. God is faithful. His power to deliver is not confined to history. It is active and present in our lives today. Whether you are facing personal struggles, spiritual battles, or societal pressures, the same God who saved his people in Egypt walks with you now. This story isn't just a record of past events. It is a reminder that faith is not about the absence of challenges. It's about trusting in a God who is greater than any challenge. Let this story inspire you to live boldly, pray fervently, and trust completely in the God who delivers. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this video. The story of Third Maccabees is not just a historical account, but a powerful reminder of faith, courage, and God's unwavering faithfulness. We hope this video has inspired you, encouraged you, and reminded you that God walks with us through every circumstance. If you found this story meaningful, please share it with those you care about. Don't forget to leave a comment below to share your thoughts or suggest other topics you'd like us to explore. in the future. Your support and engagement inspire us to continue bringing impactful stories from the Bible to life. Keep living with faith, hope, and courage. God is always with you. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next video.